Okay, good afternoon or good morning or good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We are talking about, in essence, the issue we want to deal with in this webinar is why social sector PPP projects sometimes fail to launch. And this is quite an important issue for many countries that have embarked on projects in the social sector, whether that's health, education, elderly care, affordable housing, and found that the project just did not get going. And the failure can take the form of a soft failure or a hard failure. Either it just kind of fizzles away somewhere along the way, or it has a sudden end by having the business case not being approved or not getting enough tender interest or bidder interest, or in the end getting terminated for fiscal and other reasons. And this can happen really at any stage as well. I'll introduce myself. I'm Nasser Masood. I'm the chair of the chapter on social sector PPPs at WAPPP. I also run a niche advisory practice called Concept Realization, which specializes in public-private partnerships and partnerships generally in the social sector. We have a really great lineup of panelists today, and the moderator is Arun Kumar. Arun sits on the leadership team for the social sector PPPs at WAPPP. He is responsible for investments in health and education with the African Development Bank, and has had a long track record of looking at partnerships and investments in these sectors in Africa and other developing countries. So Arun, I'll leave it to you. Welcome, and looking forward to this panel.
Thank you, Musab. A warm welcome to all our experts, panelists, and everyone joining online for this webinar, which is very critical. And I'm honored to moderate this panel. As Nasir mentioned, that procurement challenge is one of the critical challenge when we look at the gestation period of social sector PPPs across emerging markets. We have brought a seasonal panels of experts to discuss this topic. Some of the housekeeping rules, we highly encourage you to interact with our panelists and network. Please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, organization, the country, and feel free to share your LinkedIn profile to connect with others. During the Q&A, you are most welcome to share your questions in the chat. We cannot address all of them, but we will try to address during the session. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. I'll just give a brief one-liner for all our panelists, and then they will introduce themselves. So firstly, we have a right balance of panelists, starting from the policy side of the social sector, in terms of the financing as well as execution part of the projects, as well as this from the consulting point of view also. So firstly, let me introduce Ms. Novi Andrani, who is the Director of Innovation and Strategic Partnership. And she brought the experience of on the planning and coordinating the PPP activities. Ms. Novi, if you can give us like a 10-second profile of yours, that would be great. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kumar. So as introduced, I've been handling PPP since 17 years this year's. And I'm also acting as the secretary of the PPP Joint Office, which is like the one-stop service for PPP coordination in Indonesia. And currently we are handling several regulations for PPP as well as the pipeline for PPP. So I think that's an introductory for me. Thank you, Kumar.
Thank you, Ms. Novi. Our second expert is Mr. Mossad Al-Bura. He is a chief PPP officer in Tatweer Building Company. Now, this company is used to be part of the Sown Wealth Fund, in Saudi Arabia. And Mr. Mossab has been instrumental and leading the transactions over $3 billion in PPP program across the social sector. And under his leadership, the company has done not only developed projects, but also executed and financing these projects. Mr. Mossab, over to you. If you can give a 10-second profile of yours, please.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, my colleagues, panelists, and the people who joined us today. My name is Mus'ab, and I've been working in the PPP sector since 2011. I've worked in different sectors in the industry, from water distribution sector, healthcare sector, and most recently in the infrastructure sector. We are at TBC, which is Tatweer Building Company. Basically, is a government state-owned company and focused mainly on the education. However, we have ambition to go beyond education in the PPP now. Hopefully, I become an added value to this webinar. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Mossab. No, I think definitely, we would like to learn from your experience on PIF, how you have been maneuvering and, managing the complex environment and stakeholder. I think it's very critical. We have covered policy side, we have covered the financing side, we covered execution as a developer and an executor. Now, let me introduce our third panelist, Mr. Ramiro Zinder. He's the founder of Talamo Sucas Project Company based out of Brazil. Now, he has a very unique profile. He's coming from a different part of the stakeholder. He's part of the consulting background, CSOs. He had worked with the multilateral development financial institution, and he also advised the government and municipal agencies across the country. Mr. Ramiro, if you can give us a 10-second profile of yours, please.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you, WAPPP, for inviting me. Special Mr. Thiago Grego for the invite. Yeah, I have the privilege to work in different parts of the ecosystem of PPPs. I'm a former Inter-American Development Bank consultant and founder of this company, develop projects here in Brazil. I'm a PPP specialist here in South America and Caribbean, and over more than 12 years in this job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramiro. So I think let's start with the first question. I think, Ms. Novi, over to you. I think since this is a more of a strategic and policy level, challenge is what we have seen, and this is critical for addressing the service gap in emerging market. There are different challenges we have seen, if you can tell in your experience in procuring social sector PPP specifically to your market, illustrating one or maybe another project which has worked and which has not worked, and what are the key lessons you have learned, and what you can share with our attendees today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Arun. So currently in Indonesia, we have 42 active projects with 7 already operational. And the pipeline spans various sectors from hospitals, correctional facilities to city street lighting and smart infrastructure, which shows strong interest from both national and local government. One standout example from the social sectors are the street lighting PPP, which this project has successfully reached financial close and currently are in operation under a clear availability payment structure. Its success illustrates how smaller scale service-oriented projects, when supported by strong municipal leadership, straightforward design, and measurable performance indicator, can become viable and bankable. So I think the key to its success were clearly defined service standards, strong municipal ownership, a simple and transparent structure, also measurable outcomes such as energy saving. This project has been in operation since July 2023, and this project provides a replicable model for other cities aiming to deliver reliable urban services through PPP mechanism. However, on the other side, we have another one unsuccessful story for social sector, which is hospital projects. These projects actually incorporated a government guarantee mechanism. While this structure aimed to provide risk mitigation for the investors, in practice, it did not fully resolve the investors' concerns. The underlying issue was the overly broad and ill-defined project scopes, which created ambiguity in services, delivery expectation, and made performance risk difficult to assess. So, although the project passed the pre-qualification stage, it failed to attract any bids. So, this suggests that risk-sharing instruments alone are not sufficient if the project's strategic focus, deliverables, and output definition are unclear or too expensive. So, the contrast between these two projects illustrates the importance of alignment between technical design, financial structuring, and also investor expectation, laying the groundwork for broader reflection on systemic constraint in social PPP procurement. So I guess that's the experiences from Indonesia's side, Arun.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Novi. I think it's clear, that if you differentiate these two projects, street lighting and hospital, I think the one of the critical part you mentioned about is the clear scope of work and looking at the project outcome, what you are trying to address. I think that's very clear. And other point you mentioned about is that willingness of the government or government agency to clarify the role of each stakeholders. And I think that's where you come up with a clear risk mitigation plan. And sometimes risk mitigation plan is also, in design perspective you discuss, but I think enforceability on practical difficult. I think let me shift to another continent now. Ramiro, in terms of your experience, you have been into, as a part of the academia, as part of the, DFI world, and as part of the consulting background also. So what do you think, based on your experience and your exposure, what are the main enablers or barriers to successfully launch for these triple P social sector projects if they are launched, specifically from your mark?
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, everything starts with a clear public policy, specific regulation for the social infrastructure sectors like health or education, whatever. And then obviously need to prepare good projects with feasibility studies aligned with the expecting for the private sector, because sometimes the public sector structuring these projects with the good intention, but these projects are not in according with the expectation from the private sector. The quality of the feasibility studies, the correct resource allocation for government, and that is the affordability of the public sector are relevant aspects for this successfully of these PPP projects. This includes correct analysis of costing, pricing, because sometimes what we see here is a huge difference between the buyers' pricing and the public sector pricing in terms of the structuring the project. So I think the real evaluation from the project it's a sensitive aspect here, and also here in Brazil we have another important point that to closing these transactions that are the guarantees for contract management. and social sectors like health and education has specifically budgets from the federal government that can be used by subnational entities for guarantees. But in most cases, these budgets are almost fully utilized by the public authority for payroll, works, and maintenance for public buildings, for example. So the correct allocation of these guarantees, even with the specifically budgets, but the commitment of these budgets is a sensitive aspect to then we can do better projects and successfully procurements.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Ramiro. I think one of the main comment which is coming from the discussion from your point of view is also the expectations of the government and expectations of the private sector to really understand what is the scope of work. I think, as you mentioned, the first point is on the policy side. If there is no clarity on the policy side or a PPP framework, then it is very difficult to kind of move forward with the project, because then it is very difficult to allocate resources from the government agency perspective to do that project feasibility aspect you are saying, specific to that particular market, specifically to the location. And that's where these questions about affordability. And I think the one point which is coming from your discussion also, the cost also, the project preparation or feasibility study, when you look at a private sector perspective, it's very expensive. And looking at the budget constraint and from emerging market, the ODA, the foreign assistance, has been reducing over a period of time, and the new trends and climate change has also impacted a lot. So that's, I think, the earmarcation of the budget has been low and it has been reducing. I think this is one of the critical, and guarantee mechanism, definitely you mentioned that it also one of the challenge. Now, when you look at these particular challenges in terms of budget, in terms of the long gestation period, if you look at this institutional and capacity matters, so what obstacles have you experienced, procuring social sector? Because I think this is more specifically to the government agencies, right? So what do you think that what are some of these obstacles, and how you kind of move around with that projects? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in terms of this regulation, and we need to align with the ministries of health and the Ministry of Education with the PPP secretariat or the PPP units in general. The Ministry of Health or Ministry of Education need to look at the project like a business case. And the point is that in most cases, we don't have the capability of these ministries to design the project like a clear business case, because it's common around the world, the existence of PPP units like the SEPPI in Brazil or the IPA in UK, for example, that are responsible for analyze the projects and develop the studies. But it's necessary that the ministry responsible for the public policy stay in line with these unities, because what we see, at least in Brazil, it's a distance between these two bodies, the ministries and the PPP unities. So I really think that it's necessary the constant capability of the ministries, the ministry responsible for the public policy, like Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, to stay in line with the PPP units that develop the studies and think this project like a business case.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. I think, Ramiro, I think one of the point you highlight is that the partnership or kind of a location of work between the different ministries and how different ministries can work. Because I think one of the point is coming out is that the time it require to prepare a project, it takes a lot of time and resources. If we look at some of the numbers, the project preparation cost could be in the range of 5 to 7%, depending upon the market, depending on the projects. And that's where the Ministry of Health or its relevant agencies for the particular sector doesn't have those resources, and they don't have a capability also or a particular structure to analyze these projects. And that's what makes also the project doesn't move forward from the planning stage to the next stage. I think let me change the continent again. Let me move to Saudi Arabia now. So, Mr. Musab is coming from one of the I think biggest sovereign wealth fund from Saudi Arabia, and the company has been doing a lot of work. Now, we would like to understand from Mr. Musab that what kind of innovation would you suggest, based on your experience, improve the procurement outcome in the social sector, Mr. Musab?
Yeah, well, just to explain on and make it clear, when we did our first infrastructure transaction at TBC, it was the first of kind in Saudi Arabia and probably the region. We did the first 60 schools in Saudi Arabia. It was the first social infrastructure, and that was back in 2018. Before that, we started that, and there was no pathfinders or benchmark ahead of us. So we realized on our previous experience to develop what are the things that we can do and innovate to move through and make it a successful transaction. So basically, what we try to did is either to avoid the future risk or enhance appetite from the market, or make it an effective and efficient procurement process. I'll give you an example. How did we avoid risk or future risk? We have done the first project, 60 schools in 60 different locations with 60 different titles and legal and ownership for those land, and to make sure that there is no future dispute on those land we selected for the project. We made sure that we have a building permit, although we were at the planning stage. We made sure that we have, and we invested, we paid a lot of money to issue the building permit. Here in Saudi Arabia, whenever you issue a building permit, it means three things to the market. It means there is no legal issue on the land, it is safe, and it's secure. There is safe and secure, I mean, from geographical issues around, for example, floods or something like this, the building is safe, etc. So, but our aim was the most important for us was we don't want to have any dispute over land ownership. So what we did, basically, we issue all the building permits we worked day and night with the municipality in order to issue the building permits for those lands. And then when we went to the market for the tender, there was no dispute, and thanks God, we still have no dispute on those land. Now those projects into operational phase.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Musab. I think, you know, the point you highlighted about the permits, what we have seen is that the projects are, you know, the relevant ministry or agency go with the projects without doing the preparedness. I think this is very important part of the project where some of the agencies, they have a very different way of processing. Like if I give an example for African Development Bank, we are not going to invest into the project or even go to the board until unless the permits are clear, because we have seen the permits could delay, as you know, it can take about 3-4 years depending upon the local regulation, like you mentioned about title, about the, you know, neighboring catchment area, that if there are some sensitive, you know, sensitive structures, then it is very difficult to do a specific project. Maybe school require a more calm and residential or a commercial place, rather than looking at something like a close to airports. I think that's where the urban planning, that's where I think you're trying to mention that urban planning has to be involved in to ensure that there are no issues around. I think let me go back to Novi. I think Novi would have more experience in terms of efficient, as you mentioned, Mr. Musab, efficient procurement. Mr. Novi, do you have you considers of looking at, you know, this whole new thing going on, artificial intelligence, blockchain, bringing this technology piece into the procurement process to avoid you know, any of the challenges? Ms.
Yeah.
Novi?
Yeah, thank you, Arun. So actually, in terms of the procurement process currently in Indonesia, we are still doing it manually. However, we do taken into consideration on putting the system into using like a web basis, where for our traditional procurement projects we do it through a online system. But for the PPP, currently we are still doing it manual, but we are trying to do it step by step by doing it using a web basis. But currently, before doing the procurement process through a web basis, in terms of the project planning and also project preparation, currently we are developing a system which we are going to use as a unified database for all the line ministries and all the regional government, so that they will have a one pipeline PPE projects. And then when we already have a mature online pipeline, then we're going to move forward into using the online procurement system. So currently we're not doing it yet, but we are thinking ahead of it. So we're going to do it later on.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Novi. Mr. Musab, I think I'll come back to the 60 projects, the 60 school you mentioned about. So how did you do the procurement? Did you look at these procurement process for each school separately, or you kind of did the procurement in at once? Because I think that's where a challenge could come in terms of the project implementation.
Yeah, we have did it at once, basically to utilize the economy of scale and eventually reduce the burden and the cost on the government. This is, we did it, but we did a lot of innovation around it in order to make sure those projects, and as you said, is 60 school at once is very difficult, probably for the market to really execute it. However, we worked hand in hand with the market. We were talking to the every single player in Saudi and in the GCC. We also talked to the banks before we launched it. We talked to the EPC contractor. We talked to the FM contractor. We made sure before we launched the project we have appetite and there is a capacity in the market to do it.
Yeah. No, I think this is very helpful, because I think the procurement is why the most of the projects we have seen is that even the projects are approved, the procurement takes a lot of time in terms of the contract management. But Mr. Musab, let me come back to you again, because when you are looking at these big programs, in your opinion, would standardization of the bidding documents or contract supports the procurement process? based on your
Yeah,
experience? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, Aaron. Standardization is a key. However, when we start our first project, there was no standardization. We were the pathfinder. We created a document that is, attractive to the market and is bankable. Then we basically used the same documentations for Wave 2, now, which is another 60 school in a different location. When we came to the next project, it was much easier for the project and the market to quickly respond to the new tender. However, I've also seen some other authorities take some pre-made documentation and put it to the market, and sometimes this doesn't work. They were looking for standardization and something familiar to the market. But if you are taking, for example, something for healthcare and then tender it for schools, you might end up with a project that is more expensive than what you looking for, because in the requirement for healthcare project is much more higher than a simple project like school. So yes, standardization is a key, is a good thing to do. However, there should be some flexibility and ensuring that whatever you are standardizing, either from the documentation standpoint, even from the process standpoint, you need to make sure the standardization work for the project you are tendering.
So thank you, Mr. Musab. I think the point you mentioned about standardization, and it's very impressive that based on your discussions and your execution capability and discussion, you are able to kind of pass on this moment that how you can use these standardized documents and bidding documents. I remember that when I was in India, I was working with that. Government of India, different ministries have different contracts and different standard bidding document. We call standard bidding document, whether it's RFQ, RFP. But Ministry of Energy, they have a standard bidding document where there is a power purchase agreement is standard. You can go through the details before you bid for the projects, whether it is about all the case one, case two bidding. And similarly, I think trying to build into the social sector is little different because each and every sector has uniqueness. And the models are so diverse that in power projects, you will find BOT or BOOT or something. But in social sector, you have different models, where you have a service model moving from a service model to whole risk transfer to the private sector. I think this is very, very interesting. I think let me go back on this same question to Ramiro. Ramiro, you have been into the CSO. Let me put you into a CSO bracket, right? Where you have your own independence voice, right? So based on your IDB experience and based on your current, so what do you think in terms of this standardization of bidding document and contracts, how it helped? Is it working in Brazil in social sector? If not, how the standardization could be, motivated or encouraged into social sector?
Yeah, it's very helpful for I think everybody that works with the PPP projects is standardization. And here in Brazil we have a recent movement in this direction that is for. I'm just looking at the changes that we have in the PPP federal law here in Brazil. We are passing a moment that our politicians are discussing some changes in the federal PPP law. So and one of the points of this the more changes that they are doing in the law is exactly the standardization of contracts, standardization of tendering process, and to unify all different sectors in documents that are standard for a better comparison for the buyers. So we here in Brazil, we are passing exactly the moment that we are thinking about how to standardization. Even we have different specific characteristics in different sectors like sanitation or street lighting or energy, and yeah, we have different aspects, but we need standardization from tendering process for contracts, and we are done this right now here in Brazil with the changes in the federal PPP law.
Thank you, Ramiro. My next question is on, I think as a multilateral development institution, we always, one of the discussion we have with the stakeholders is that how, the project is having an impact on the society, right? We call it a development outcome. And I think that's where, which is very, very critical, that project is commercially viable. But when you look at it, the outcomes, what we are looking at, as we have learned from the session, that one of the challenge we have is there is a design and scope issues always, because it has to be a output and outcome based specification, right? What is the output of the investments and how it is going to impact the society. So my question to Musab, to you, is that what procurement strategies have embedded development impact indicators, specifically genders or service level outcome in social sector, especially in the PPP contracts?
Sure. From the development indicators, it's very important in the social infrastructure. And by design, when for our school projects, the famous school project, by design, probably half of those schools are primarily female schools. And the female inclusion in the process is key, especially creation job for female for this project. The female school is strictly that you do the maintenance through female staff, you do the cleaning through maintenance staff, female staff, you do everything for that school through female staff. And that is a big job creation for female citizens and residents of Saudi Arabia. And that we are, as we put 60 schools in one geography, those 60 schools require a lot of staff to operate, maintain, and clean, basically. It's not only that, also create job opportunity for the residents of those cities where the schools are. And now one of the virtue of PPP is transferring the staff from the government side to the private sector side. So we're moving and giving the citizens of those cities where the schools are basically jobs with the private sector, basically a job that has a future, clear, and really good jobs. This is on job creations and gender inclusion indicator. There are other indicators that also we are looking at. For example, the climate change, and we are very conscious about those projects are supporting the initiatives in reducing the carbon print. 9% of the school energy that we build is actually provided by renewable energy. Specifically here in Saudi Arabia, we are blessed with sun shine 36 days in the year. So the solar panels are installed in all those schools that provide 9% of the energy that's required by schools. We also made those assets and the infrastructure available for the community around it. We made it to have a sport facility to be used after hours. We made it to be training centers for the community around the school. So we enabled training provider to to the community around schools. So there are a lot of indicators that is, even if it's unfortunately not directly required in the RFP, however, it's indirectly the it's feed up and have been provided to the community, and has been bring a tremendous development indicator aspect.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Musab. I think thank you so much for your leadership. I think these development impacts, when we talk about as a these, you hear these words from the multilateral institutions or DFIs, not from the commercial bank, I believe. So there, but I think thank you so much. The moving towards the social sector development impact point of view, I think maybe sooner these projects or these indicators would be part of RFP, I hope. Now, Novi, let me come back to you. Now, you are still into that, planning stage. How do you see these development impacts, or indicators putting into your planning or PPP contracts? Do you think that in Indonesia, these practices are ongoing? Or if not, are you planning to put into some sort of a framework where I think Indonesia is one of the country where the climate change is one of the I think one of the high impact, and because I want to bring that adaptation versus mitigation, right? So how you are bringing that gender or development impact specific awareness, indicators into the contracting or procurement strategies. Ms. Novi.
Yeah, in terms of those development policies, we do now realize that some of the financial institutions are actually requiring the country to adapt the at least the ESG, the environment, social, and governance. And aside from that, some of the financial institution also actually putting their consideration to put the gender and social inclusion as a consideration when they are going to give the financing that are required by the private party. So considering those issues in terms of Indonesia, we do realize those issues are coming up. So that's why in terms of our policies, when we are doing project preparation, those issues should be considered by the government when they are doing the project preparation. So even though in terms of the implementation, we might not be perfect yet, but under our current regulation, we do already acknowledge that, and by doing the project preparation, we need to also consider the gender equality and social inclusion, as well as the environment and also the governance aspect when we are doing the project preparation, aside from the commerciality and then also the bankability. So we already put that consideration into our project preparation process, Arun.
So thank you, Ms. Novi. I think this is very, very encouraging, using those words like ESG and social inclusion. I think these are music to the DFIs, and thank you so much for bringing up. Ramiro, let me come to you. Now, we are seeing some of the point which are mentioned by Novi also and Mr. Musab also, that the challenges which are related to stakeholders throughout the entire project cycle, not only just to the procurement, because procurement is one of the step to the project completion. And now that has a huge impact on project failure, delays, and public opposition. And that's why you look at emerging market like in Africa, the gestation period for project preparation or going to the success is about 5 to 6 years. If you look at some of the specific projects. So based on your experience, how can a stakeholder engagement during the project life cycle mitigate risk of project failure or public opposition? Ramiro.
Yeah, Important point, and well, I'll be bring two aspects here. The first is it's the wrong practice to define public policies in a closed room, you know, without consultation with all the stakeholders, not only agencies, but partners, the private sector, sponsors, the entire PPP's ecosystem. It's necessary to identify, like Novi bring to us, they identify the social impact aspects of geology, for example, Mossad to talk about lands, and the ambiental aspects, the impact. And it's necessary a long-term analysis. For example, example here in Brazil about education, right? Everybody knows that in Brazil, we are living changes in the age pyramid caused by the decline in the birth rate and the increase of the population longevity. So it's not an overstatement to think that in the near future, schools may be switched in nursing homes, so we need to think about that, and this is not discover or thinking in a closed room with a few politicians, to open the dialogue with the whole ecosystem and PPPs. And another point that I really appreciate to talk about, it's necessary of the communication plan, even in the first steps of the project, in the beginning of the project, a communication plan that expose in popular terms the objective, the benefits of the project for the whole society. Here in Brazil, we are living a legal dispute about the PPP education in São Paulo. Teachers and public servants unions are saying that is the privatization of the education and stuff. But in fact, this kind of PPP, at least in Brazil, what we call the PPP of education, but in fact, this PPP is much more about a building PPP than an education PPP, because the main objective of this social infrastructure project is transfer only the operation and the maintenance of edifications. There's no changes in roles of the public agents in education system. They still in the front of the education system, the public agents. So it's not a privatization at all, but we need a good communication plan from the beginning of the project to communicate with the society and all stakeholders. What is this project and what is your main objective?
Thank you, Ramiro. I think you compliment Mr. Mossab in terms of the education project we were talking about, 60 locations, I think, and that's where I think when we look at either a policy side, when the government is trying to build up a policy, there has to be a consultation from all the stakeholders. I remember that when we were looking at a healthcare strategy in the bank, when we were planning for that, we had actually almost 3 to 6 months of consultation, not only with the government agencies across Africa, but also we brought all the stakeholders, whether DFIs, private sector, financial institution, commercial banks, and we had an extensive discussion, and even we disclosed those consultations, and to avoid that, public position that some of the aspects which are not relevant or which are relevant included into the project. And I was talking to Nasir some time back, how public opposition can kill a project. There was in Asia, there was one project that was about $6 billion projects. There was a port and a power project. And there are a group of farmers, the fish farmers, fishermen, they actually were not included into the public consultation. And then later on, when the project was about to start the construction, land was acquired, and then they came in and said that nobody consulted them, and that is impacting their livelihood. The ecological environment they are impacting. And then after a tussle of 3 to 4 years, that project has gone now. I don't know how many millions of dollars have spent on the land in terms of the procurement of some of the project activities, and even the time, how much time has been wasted only because of one reason, that it was not consulted with the relevant stakeholders who were part of that. Now, I this is a surprise question. I think I'll go back to each and every one about the technology. How do you think that technology can play a role in the process of social sector triple Ps? Let me start with Novi.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, so that in terms of the technology, Indonesia might not be a perfect example, Arun, because as I said, we are still using manual procurement process for our PP projects. But we have been learning from other countries where they are using technology to have the database provided online, to have their procurement process to do it online. So this is what we are currently planning to do as well. So actually, for the past years, we have been assisted by one of the DFI to use a source as one of the online platform to be used in Indonesia. And currently, we are in the process of applying this online platform. So I think in terms of technology, Indonesia is moving forward, Arun.
Thank you, Ms. Novi. I think this online procurement has been, going a lot in terms of the infrastructure sectors. When I talk about, let's say, coal mining or mining projects, so you can do online, auctions and online commodity, purchase on that. Now, Mr. Musab, let me come back to you on the technology piece. What do you think that how technology can play a role in procurement process? And is Saudi Arabia doing some sort of activities on the social sector front in utilizing or leveraging the technology in the process?
Of course, I think Saudi Arabia is one of the leading countries in utilizing technology in the processes. When it comes to the procurement process, yes, we have 100% technology supported process where all the biddings process is being using an online platform. But in my opinion, I think there is more the technology to be utilized in the process. It's not only in the procurement process, also using technology to predict where to build those projects and how employ AI, artificial intelligence, in really getting results where what you need, what asset you need it in what area, and what type of asset, size of asset you need, etc., etc. Now, what we are doing here also, we are employing technology to predict the needs and how the distance between the schools we are building. We are also using technology to basically optimize the entire process from the business case phase all the way to the execution phase. And I think technology will get more role into this process.
Thank you, Mr. Musab. I think you're right that technology could play a role not only in terms of the policy, in terms of the preparation side or procurement side, but also in terms of the operational efficiency, looking at or improving the outcome on that side, that in terms of training and development for education projects, for healthcare projects, indefinitely, optimal, optimization of reducing the patient time in terms of the, getting admission, in terms of, diagnosis. And I think this is very, very helpful. So Ramiro, let me come back to you on this question. I think, Brazil have been, I remember Brazil have been very innovative in terms of utilizing the technology in other sectors. But give us some insight about the technology, leveraging technology into social triple Ps.
Yeah, we don't have a good use, let me say that, of technology in not only in social infrastructure projects, but in PPPs in general form. There's a point here about this aspect of technology with the in 2021 our politicians approved a new tendering law for projects of infrastructure here in Brazil. We have a specific law that regulates the tendering process in all states, all subnational entities, and the federal government too. So in this law, there are a specific case that the tendering process would be electronic or online, and it's an innovation because the latest law saying that it would be presential. It's a personal process that the buyers that will stay in a local, in specific room to do this tendering process. So the new laws say that are electronic, that are online process. But what we see here is that the platforms, the system, the information system of municipalities, of states, are not prepared for this new regulation, for this new innovation. So I think that the technology market are running out to can admit this process that be in the new law, so the buyers and all stakeholders in this projects can be used the form as in the law. So I really think that a few distance between what are the innovation in the law and what in fact we are doing here in terms of our practice in the PPPs project in Brazil.
Yeah, thank you, Ramiro. I think technology has been very, very active in terms of leveraging the different sectors, even I think social sector also, and the procurement also. When I was talking some of the sponsors in healthcare, they have a online platform where they procure different materials or different items for the hospital. And I think there are a lot of movement towards the startups in terms of online procurement. I think during the COVID time also, we have seen a lot of, encouragement from the technology in terms of procuring and sourcing items for the healthcare or any other particular sector through online. I think this is very, very interesting area. So one of my question is to Ms. Novi. We have seen that the challenges coming from the policy side, challenging coming from institutional capacity side, challenging coming from the contract management, and financing structures also, blending and all those things. What do you think, Ms. Novi, in terms of what role development partners and DFI could play a role in building a procurement capacity or also providing advisory support to the triple P social sectors?
Yeah, actually, this is quite a good questions, Arun, because actually, in terms of Indonesia, we have been receiving a lot of assistance from DFI, starting from the project planning, where the DFI has been assisting us on providing strategic input for the sectoral level planning to ensure the PPP projects are aligned with the broader development objective and funding priorities. They have been also assisting us in screening the projects, and they have been assisting us in developing the screening tools itself so that we are able to use those screening tools to define which appropriate funding mechanism for projects, including a PPP. So that's in terms of the planning stage. For the preparation stage, obviously, we have a lot of assistance from the DFI to structure our projects, to prepare our projects, to develop the business cases. So we have a few project development facility provided by those DFI, starting from the early stage advisory work until the transaction stage. And then we also in terms of the transaction stage, uh, one of the DFI actually provided the financial structuring through the credit enhancement, where we received those credit enhancement to ensure the project bankability, because this project is quite large in terms of the investment cost. Actually, it's a satellite projects, so we received the assistance from one of the DFI. They act as the credit enhancement so that they would attract the other financial institutions so that we can ensure the project's bankability. So I think in terms of the DFI role, those examples that I mentioned highlight how the DFI serves not only as the guardian of the governance, but also as the enabler of strategic readiness, the qualified project development, and also sustainable implementation, especially in a complex and service-oriented social infrastructure.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Nori. I think you covered most of the point. I'm coming from DFI. So what I think is very interesting point you mentioned about on the governance side, DFIs or multilateral institutions, they are not only money bank, they also, have a policy dialogue. They have that convening power of policy dialogue between different stakeholders, and also disseminate the knowledge or experiences what DFI is having in different markets to strengthen the sector policy, strengthen the private sector environment, and also the point about how we de-risk the projects. Like you mentioned about the credit enhancement, like the main role of DFI is to de-risk the project, because on the investment requirement for SDGs is huge. One single DFI cannot do that. Even most of the DFI cannot do that. We require private sector to come and take their fair share of investments. So that credit enhancement is very important in all this transaction. I think this is very helpful. And I think one of the other point is that we bring other development partners. Like when you talk about CSOs, when you talk about sector specific development partner like IFAD for agriculture, for energy, for other development partners, and bilateral donors or organizations also who have interest into that particular country and particular sector. And also I think pushing for the ESG mandate, ensuring that all the companies, they are complying with the ESG requirements, because our mandate is to look at that climate change aspect also. I think this is very helpful, the point you mentioned. Ramiro, you want to come in for this question, because you are coming from the same I think bracket. I'm putting you in IDB bracket, so if you can give us some insight on that particular question.
Sorry, Arun, what question are you talking about?
So the role of the DFI, how do you think
All
that
right.
role of DFIs can play in terms of the
Yeah.
procurement capacity and
Yeah.
transactions?
I think not only financing projects, in my experience in multi-development bank, I saw the relevant not only financing projects and allocating budgets from countries, but also do the training of the public agencies to improve the capability of the public agents to develop good PPP projects. And maybe not only the public agents, but the private sector too. And I was talking this week that I think here in Brazil we have a gap of players with the good capability to entering in tendering process and do the procurement and sign contract with the public sector in social infrastructure. Because in another sectors like sanitation or sanitation or street lighting, we have a huge market, a prepared market in the private sector to contracts with the public sector. But in social infrastructure, we don't have the same scene. So I think that this development banks need not only to finance and allocate budgets for countries to develop good projects, but also has a policy of training, of capability, the public sector and the private sector. So we have a better PPP ecosystem to develop projects like these.
No, thank you. I think you highlighted a very important point on how you can build the institutional capacity, not only in the policy side, but also on the transaction side. But I think most of the DFI have that grant element into public projects and PPP also, where they don't not only provide transaction advisor support, but like tools, as Novi mentioned, assessment tools or screening tools, but also capital. Some of the time, looking at the cost of the advisors, even the legal cost also, because the contract management is very unique. Most of the time you find that the government doesn't have the capability of negotiating if you're doing it the first time. So that's where the DFI provide support. But thank you so much. Thank you all. I think we have a guest with us, Ms. Soumya Azam. So she will introduce herself. Soumya, over to you, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Art, for having me today. This is Soumya Azam, the head of PP department at Ministry of Education from Jordan. Actually, I would like to briefly share our experience at the Ministry of Education in Jordan, where we pursued a PPP pilot project to develop 14 schools under one of the PPP model. We had a strong advisory support from IFC and EBRD and completed the full procurement cycle. Actually, we faced several difficulties during that stage, where during the due diligence period, some sites had to be replaced due to ownership issues, and a few steep sites were challenging from technical perspective. Other challenges related to commercial considerations, as no tax exemptions was granted for building materials and equipment, which led to raise the financial offer submitted. Despite these efforts, the project was ultimately cancelled because the financial offer was significantly higher than our estimated cost. This highlighted the difficulty of attracting bidders in the social sector and the mismatching between market expectation and public affordability. The key challenges in our project were a market response, the cost mismatching, and the long duration. I don't know if I can raise two questions for the panelist, Arun. I have two
Please
questions
go
for
ahead.
him.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah. The first one is what methods or practices can governments adopt to keep financial benchmarks realistic and up to date throughout the PPP procurement process? This is the first question. And the second one is what kind of contingency planning or adaptive procurement strategies have you seen used effectively in other social PPP sectors to address situations where better participation is limited or unexpectedly low? Thank you.
Thank you, Soumya. I think these are the very relevant questions. I think if I can give response from my side, and then I'll ask Mr. Musab, Novi, and Nasir also can come in, because Nasir has a good background of that particular market. I think the benchmarking is very difficult, but I think what is very important is that the preparation work is very critical, because I think when you talk about there is a mismatch of market affordability and the project cost is very, it's challenging. We could do only if we have spent time and money into the project preparation. When we look at a project preparation and we look at a cost, we cannot build a 5-star property into a location where the population is mostly middle class and lower middle class. So we have to look at a project design which is market fit rather than a presumption of something. And that's one of the thing. And that's where the consultation, before we go into any of the project procurement process, it's very, very important during the design and preparation stage, the right advisor should be put in. And then a consultation would be looked into that. What is the requirement? Because sometimes ministries, they're completely off track what they want to do because of maybe unnecessary pressure coming from top. But I think it has to be more realistic. And the realistic thing comes from from the market, from the stakeholders, from the CSOs, and all those particular affordability aspect. The project should serve the society, not a particular set of society. I think that's one point. Maybe I will give floor to Nasir. Nasir, over to you. I think you could give a more background on this.
Yeah, thanks, Arun. And I have to say this has been a really amazing panel. I think we can write a compendium on lessons learned from what everyone contributed. Sumaya, I think to address your question, I see one of the issues is getting a public sector comparator, or I prefer to call it a shadow bid model that truly represents what the government should expect by way of a bid. I mean, what we tend to see is that, you have on the one hand, the figures that you're accustomed to in terms of the construction cost of a school, let's say. But then we come and put that in a PPP framework where we say you have to make it survive for 25 years, and then you have to cover your life cycle cost and everything else. So that adds to your availability payment, because a lot of the time the public sector doesn't take into account that they actually have to replace, some capital equipment like boilers and chillers, and they don't necessarily introduce the maintenance cost into it. Then you've got an availability risk, you've got a delivery risk, which then means you're not going to local contractors. You need to bring an EPC contractor on top of the local contractors who will actually direct and take that risk. So you have, on top of the local contractors, you've got the EPC contractor and the PPP contractor. And believe it or not, none of them are going to work for free. So each will apply a margin that represents the risk that they're taking. And it's not unrealistic to expect a 30 or 50% uplift on the prices that you tend to see. Other things we see, this is addressing your second question, is inadequate allowances for inflation. I think sometimes these budgets are compiled, at a certain point in time, and then 2 or 3 years on, project is launched, but these are not necessarily updated properly to take into account inflation, because it's one thing to say, let's increase it by CPI, but if we experience a huge shortage in, say, steel worldwide, and that impacts a particular significant component in your project, it's not going to be picked up by the normal consumer price index type increase. I'll give the space for other panelists because I'm sure they have very worthwhile things to reply.
Thank you, Nasser. Thank you. Ramiro, Novi, Musab, anyone wants to come in here?
Do you allow me here, Aaron?
Please.
Yeah, we were, I think Nasser aware and Sumaya aware, we were participants in the school project of Jordan. And then we pulled out from that project for a very different reason. It's not the subject of this. We were actually ready to submit the bid on the day of submission. However, there was some other reason that compelled us to pull out from that project. The thing I can give you, a feedback from what we have seen, primarily there is, a very in terms of we had a very difficult time finding a very good local contractor in Jordan. It was really difficult to have a contract with a local contractor in Jordan who understands PPP projects. And that comes at a price that inflated the price, that the fact that there is little bit not adequate capacity in the contracting or in the market from either EPC contractor or FM contractor, that definitely have added to the price of that project. In addition to that, I think from benchmarking perspective, I will add to Nasser's point. I think the comparison from one project to another, when you are trying to basically do the business case for the project, it's not to only look at benchmark from different market. Try to find out what are the economic comparative comparison, the economic parameter comparison between Jordan and any other country that you bring your benchmark from. Also, you see the geographical difference and the climate and the need for example, the heating equipment or the cooling equipment and so on and so forth. All that has, there are different things to look at, and of course, TBC with our experience, we can help you in what capacity, in any capacity you need, Sumaya. We owe it to you. We participated in that project and we pulled out. We are happy to really support your effort in this project. We think it's very exciting. We think it's very nice project, and we are unfortunate to see that project cancelled.
Thank you, Mr. Musab. I think this is very helpful because that's where the consultation part comes in. I think when we talk about that, internal consultation is very critical, and Nasser also mentioned that sometimes what happened is the private sector also submit the bids, unsolicited bid or shadow bid, which could be looked at one of the starting point. But I think as Mr. Musab mentioned, that you have to look at a critical aspect, which are local component, which are international components. And if you're looking at the current situation, like we are in an era of tariff, then I think the whole benchmark goes south way, because you are talking about different items coming from, it has disrupted the whole supply chain. So I think it's a more of a consultation based on our experience as a DFI. We have seen, and it's a continuous evolving. The pricing, there should be some flexibility should be provided in the contract, that some of the things are nobody can foresee, like COVID-19. If you had a contract in COVID-19, nobody will supply at that cost, because a mask which was about 10 cent, that was selling at $10, right? And then how can you justify? And that's where if you have a contract or supplying those particular items, then I think the private sector no option to just leave. I think there has to be some sort of a comfort to the private sector that if you're putting some X amount of dollars, then the government will ensure that you will get at least X plus inflation plus the premium into the market. If that understanding is not there, I think then the development outcomes which we are talking about, or whether it is by serving the schools or serving the healthcare facilities, that will be challenged. I think this was very, very interesting session. Let me bring Nasser.
Yeah, Arun, there's a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Somehow they're all directed at Musab. I don't know, Abu
Oh.
Rashid. Either you're being very controversial or you're whatever. Shall I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
Please,
let me read them out to help out with this. How do you do this? Yeah. So the ones that I saw so far go like this. So there was Mr. Mahesh Singhal, Director of Water PPP Projects at Saudi Water Partnership Company. And the question to Abu Rashid, did you have any problems in terms of bidder interest due to scope of work being limited to construction and not being offered the operation and management? So I guess this is about pedagogical services being part of it. And I think that's quite a relevant question, probably with the tide change that's happening now. Saudi.
I think Nasser, and just to clarify, it's not only limited to construction. There is also FM element in the project, and that actually one of the most difficult when we looked at the project. In construction is always easy. You multiply X number of riyal or dollar by the cost of construction of 1 meter. You end up with the cost of the construction. However, when it comes to the facility management, and in the lack of benchmark for facility management, specifically output spec KPI facility management, there is a very difficult equation basically.
I wonder if the question was about facilities management or if it was about pedagogical services. So,
and to make it easy, this is how we made it easy for the market is basically we said to the market there is no education, it's only education and facility management. The education is under the still under the scope of the government.
Yeah. The other question is from Matab Al-Zahrani, who's a researcher who specializes in privatization and PPPs in the education sector. And he's asking, are there any publicly available PPP policies or guidelines in education on the TBC website that investors or stakeholders can access?
There is a public available policies in NCP website, which is the National Center for Privatization. It's about the PPP general. The policies related to education is not necessarily toward the PPP of education. It's about, basically the size of the school, the size of the number of kids per classroom. That's internal policy we are developing with MOE, not necessarily related to the PPP, but the PPP policy is widely available for the public in CP website.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say about failure to launch is having actually these specifications and so on settled up front. We've been on a school project, won't name where it is, and so on, where there's been a change in terms of the number of students per size of land and so on, and this just kept changing over time. And every time you end up saying this land plot can take this number of students, and then it can then increase or decrease. And while you're trying to structure this project, it really doesn't help. So actually freezing those standards and specifications is really crucial at the beginning. There was a follow-up question from Metab, and that's around the Aramco schools, which apparently have a strong reputation in terms of quality design and management, and asking how similar your model is to that. I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah, Aramco school has started, I think, 70 years ago. And so far, they built around 120, 130 schools so far, since 70 years ago. And they did it under their social responsibility programs. However, the school we are building is for the government and the government budget. And therefore, we cannot say to Aramco what kind of schools they need to build, what's the level of school they need to build. It's social responsibility. They do it as under that When it comes to the government school or the public school, it will follow the standard of public schools. And therefore, there is an affordability envelope that we have to be aware of. And one of the success, this program is live and has a lot of interest in the market and bankable, is we are within the affordability envelope. If we decided to go beyond that affordability envelope, the central government or basically MOF will shut us down and we say, guys, this is not what we are paying for. So we are conscious of what Aramco has built. So far, they built 120, 130 schools, as I said. In 7 years, we built the same number of Aramco schools in various locations of Kingdom. So 120 schools in 70 years versus 120 schools in 7 years. So there is good comparison.
Just looking, I can't see any more questions, so I'll take the opportunity to ask one, as we have about 3 minutes left. So one of the issues I see with projects not seeing the light of day is the expectation of what the project will actually result in. I'll give an example of, in particular in healthcare, where you introduce a modern service in a place that has not delivered those modern services. So let's imagine cardiology. You have a cardiology ward that really is offering nothing more than somewhere for the patient to stay, not even ICU, and somewhere to examine the patient. And then you're asked to introduce modern cardiology. And there you have surgical theaters for open heart surgery, you have cath labs for invasive cardiology, you have all sorts of additional diagnostics and so on, which is great for the people, of course, because now they have this kind of quality diagnostics and treatments at their doorstep and ICU and everything. But then you don't have the medical staff that can operate this. And this may not be in a capital city where you can easily obtain health workers. It could be somewhere remote. And then the direction shifts to saying, okay, well, let's not do this as an infrastructure project. Let's do it as an integrated project and bring in the clinical services, because we clearly can't do this. But then you've already embarked on the project to define it as an infrastructure PPP project. I mean, I don't know if someone would like to comment on that, if they have had a similar experience.
Well, Nasser, if you allow me, I would like to jump in, but I would like to step back in the Sumaya's question about the competitive in bidding process, because it's common here in Latin America and Caribbean that we have external control bodies like the Court of Auditors, for example, that demands competition of bidding process and tendering process in PPP projects. So we need to stay, we need to pay attention in this situation. So we use here some methods or practice that are the market sounding in the beginning of the project. It's in the market sounding. It's a practice that you can listen, you can talk with the private sector, with the experience of the private sector to do a better project with some tips that they can do about his experience in these markets. And it's in the beginning of the project, you can do the market sounding, and the roadshow is another method that you can do. So with these methods, with this practice, you can identify if we have a good expectation from competitors, investors in the bidding process, or if we have to pay attention because we have low competitors, low investors in this sector. As I said, here in Brazil, in social infrastructure like health or education, we don't have many investors in this sector. So it's a good question done by Sumaya that I can step back and talk. Thank you, Nasser.
Fantastic. We actually have one last question. We can take a couple more minutes. And it's to anyone who would like to answer from our colleague Gazmir. What are the capacity of public agencies in your country to structure and manage a PPP procurement process? I think Musab has already answered that. Significant capacity, I think. Perhaps Novi?
Yes, thank you, Nazir. So not all our public agency has the same capacity, but I can say most of the big ministries, line ministries like the Ministry of Transportation and the Ministry of Public Works, they do have the capacity to structure and manage a PPP procurement process. In Indonesia, we do also have what we call as the National Public Procurement Agency, where they act as the regulator who provide the standard regulation for the procurement on PPP, as well as providing the model bidding documents for some of the sectors. So not all our sectors are available for the model bidding documents, but we already have some of sectors like street lighting and then also airport. We do already have the model bidding documents. So I can say the balance of the capacity of the public agencies are not the same, but we do have some prominent line ministries and as well as the local government who has the capacity to do their own project preparation and do the procurement process. Thank you, Nasser.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay,
I think we can see that.
Yeah, Arun,
we can see that we have passed. We have passed the time. I think. Any final comments or any observation from panelists, or we move to Nasser finally.
No, really, thank you. I mean, it's really been very, very insightful, and even for us who've been in this field for decades, have picked up a few gems out of this, or some of the things we thought of have been really much better crystallized. It's tremendous when you can bring firsthand experience, and I particularly like how we have two of the panelists have worked both on the public sector side and the private sector side, so they've kind of seen it from both ends. You send out a tender document, and then when you're on the other side, you receive another entity's tender document. You start to see where you could have improved or where it's really lacking, and this is really very helpful. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your contributions. Thank you to the audience and for the questions and the comments and so on. I think there is a way to save the webinar chat Hopefully there is. So we'll get that. And if for any reason we've missed out a question, because it's sometimes quite difficult to follow it through the chat, we'll come back and address that by email. Thank you all. If I can ask the for some feedback and a group photo. Thank you all.